Hi everyone, good morning. This is Eran Kinsbruner. I'm here with Eilon, and we are truly excited, especially this week after the launch of iOS 12 and the new iPhones, to run a live webinar with you guys showing the latest and greatest of iOS 12 on the new iPhones with Appium and XCUITest, and explain you what's the meaning and the implications of the new iPhones and the new technology on your existing applications. So before we start, I just want to go through some housekeeping information. We are going to run one short live poll during the webinar. Please participate. It will help this conversation. Feel free to ask questions to the Q&A panel throughout the webinar. We will address as many questions as we can during and after the webinar. And this webinar and slides will be available few days after the webinar. This webinar is being recorded. So again, thank you for joining. And Uzi, good morning. Thank you for joining me.
Hey, Ran, good morning. So one thing that I would like to add regarding today's webinar, so yes, iOS 12 and iPhone Max and Max S did not added a big thing. But based on if we're talking about the automation, there are a lot of changes with the way that you implement the automation, the way that you think about the automation. So today, together with the highlights of the new things, we're going to give you a few tips for better automation.
Perfect. So in today's agenda, we're going to touch some of the key features. There are still some innovation and new functionality that was added in iOS 12. And we're going to highlight some of the implications iOS 12 has on your existing application. Then we will drill down into the Appium versus XCUITest frameworks and show some of the differences and use cases each framework introduced to the developers and testers. And we'll run a few cool demos that Uzi prepared using Appium, XCUITest to show some image injection and some smart reporting during the webinar. So one second, I see that the slides are not in sync. 1 second, we'll solve it. Okay, resolved. Just proving that we are on a live webinar, so things are happening. So in iOS 12, and some of you, and actually as part of the automation preparation for the webinar, we have seen it. Apple prepared some nice performance improvements, both on the new iPhones as well as iOS 12. And we see it when you run scripts and test automation on older devices versus new devices. We see the gap, we see the differences in the performance. So obviously, the new devices with the A12 Bionic chipset, etc., are performing much better. And you know, from testing perspective, performance perspective, you do want to take this into consideration. There are some other generic iOS, as always, enhancements in the camera, Apple Photos, Siri, and such things. This comes in every release, but just important to note. I think an important change, and soon I'll get your take on that, Uzi, that Apple did, especially after Google Android Pie introduced, is the digital well-being. And in iOS 12, Apple introduced the screen time functionality, and it provides the users, and the users can vary between, you know, kids, parents, business guys, etc., some productivity enhancements and monitoring, including battery functionality, group notification information, etc. And what it means, at least from my point of view, is that your application performance, usage, statistics, etc., is now visible more than ever to the end user. So if your application generates or consumes much more battery than others, it will be very, very high on the product monitoring in the screen time in the Apple device. So if you fail to measure and release a high-performing application, it will be visible to your end users. So this is something that Google did with Android Pie. Apple is doing it as well. So I think this is going to be a very interesting feature for application developers. What do you think? Do you think it's interesting, important?
Yeah, so I have to comment for that. So yes, it's going to be very interesting to see you always had to think about the performance when we are talking about implementation of the application. But in this case, as Apple added it to the main dashboard, is going to be very visible. The user, even the regular user that do not dig into the application, will be able to see it immediately. How much time the application been open, and more important, how much resources been used by the application.
And how many notifications this application is sending to the user, which is also another way of product usage. So it has some nice value.
And another thing that I think is important now, both Apple and Google understand that the phone are really important part of our life, and they try to give us a way to balance it. And you have to remember, it needs to be balanced. Application is important, mobile devices are important, but we have also life.
Yep, definitely. There are also some other privacy and security changes which are important to be noted. If you are testing and automating on the iPads as well, so there are some new gestures that were implemented specifically to the iPad, especially to reach the home screen. So if you need to look into your existing test automation scripts and see if it has any implications on your script, so if it can actually improve your test scenarios, take advantage of these new gestures.
One more thing that's not related to the user and to the devices, but very important to Perfecto, is the connectivity. We have a very strong and big connectivity team. And in order to be able to connect iOS 12, in order to be able to connect the new devices, they work very hard. Apple changed a lot of the thing in the low level, in the connectivity level. I know it shouldn't be something that you as a developer or as a tester need to think about it. But Perfecto Mobile, we did a lot of work in order to make this phone available for you on the same day.
Yep.
And this is something that's very important to Perfecto Mobile, to have the newest devices connected to the cloud on the same day that's been released to the market. And here in this iOS, we had a lot of challenges that have been solved by our strong R&D team.
Definitely, Uzi, and I think that what helped the R&D in Perfecto be agile about it was that we picked all the recent betas since day one and supported them, so we knew what's coming in advance, and we could have prepared and launched it the same day. And
one last comment here. So yes, we support the iOS 12 immediately, but when the new hardware arrived, there've been some changes been required in order to support it. So you have to remember, in order to have first day support or same day support, you need to have agile connectivity.
Yep. Okay. So in a nutshell, so what all of these things mean to you? And you know, this is an annual release that Apple is doing. A few things which you as developers and testers need to take into consideration are the following bullets. You definitely need to do a refresh to your device test lab, and we have 3 new iPhones that were launched. We are looking into a new iPad that is going to be introduced next month. So your existing device lab obviously needs to change and needs to reflect these changes, so you are not being surprised by bugs that slipped into production on the new devices. And keep in mind, these new devices have new hardware, new screen size and resolution. In the next slide, I'm going to show you my recommendation from a test coverage perspective for your new lab after iOS 12 was released. In addition, you need to allocate, as Uzi mentioned, resources for possible patch releases. We are already aware of iOS 12.1 public beta that was released. So patches are going to be introduced on a weekly basis, as usual by Apple. So make room for possible patches, etc.
Let's talk a little bit about the adoption.
Yep.
So iPhone, unlike Android, the adoption is much faster.
Yes.
So both previous devices, user with previous devices upgraded to the new version, and we see more than 87% of upgrade. And another thing is we see a lot of people that actually bought the new devices. The numbers are crazy, and you have to remember, it just released last week. So when you are developing an application, when you have an important application to support the newest iPhone, It's always a big deal, and it's always important. And you have to remember, in most of the cases, you are not going to have the device before it's going to be released to the market.
Definitely, definitely.
And that actually leads us to the poll. And the question is, okay, if we have a new iOS device, and we know that it's going to release the new iOS version and a new iPhone device, new hardware, how do you are going to test it? Or how do you prepare to make sure that your application support the new device? So we have three options. On real devices, okay, I have real devices, I'll wait for the new version, and then I'm going to test it and then release it. Or on emulator, should I use the emulator that's been released before? Or to have new iOS installed on the old version. So I'm going to have my previous device install the iOS 12 and run my test. What do you think, or what do you do today? What is the best practice that you are using today in order to test your application? And you have to remember, you want to be new iPhone iOS support on the same day that it's been released.
And what's not in the slide, I think, is also making your test cases ready for the new iOS and new devices. Some of the tests might be broken because of new screen and new changes. So it's also about making your tests ready as well the same day. So what we are seeing here, that the results are kind of split between the three answers, which makes sense because, as you mentioned, it's not easy to get access to the real devices the same day. So sometimes you need to balance between using the simulators from Xcode and the new iOS.
But in this case, you also, maybe you can share the results with the audience. So this is what we're seeing, that it's almost the same, but a lot of people wait for the new device in order to test it. It means that your release process needs to be very agile, because you have few days from the moment that you get the new device until you are going to release the application. If you have a bug, you need to make sure that you release a version fast. By the way, well, one of the things that we are doing here in Perfecto, we are getting hundreds of devices on the same day in order to connect it to the different clouds, and we are playing with few of the devices, and it's always we can find bugs on an application on the first or second days of the device, and then it will take few days for the enterprise to fix their application.
Cool. So let's move on with the webinar. Thank you guys online for providing the feedback. So as mentioned, the new devices, the new operating system is already making some noise. Only after a week, we see that there are three new devices. Two of them are already available in the stores, and we have iOS 12 and iOS 12.1 public beta. We hear about some unstable Wi-Fi and cellular connectivity, flaky charging on the XS Max. So obviously, all of these impact your existing applications that are in the App Store. So as soon as you can get the hand of on these new devices, and also recommend to have a device configured against the new beta, it will be very useful for you to get the feedback back to your developers on what are these changes doing to your existing application in the App Store. So let's move with the lab configuration. The day after iOS 12 was released, the current market from Apple is divided into four categories, four iOS families. Unfortunately, and that's my recommendation, iOS 9 is still kind of relevant, and if you have analytics, you have access to analytics, you can validate it and do a risk-based decision. But iPhone 4S and the iPad mini are still popular in many regions, many countries, and these are locked on the iOS 9.3.5. Same goes with the iOS 10.3.3, which is also end of life, but at least iPhone 5C is popular, and iOS 10, by the way, is a bit lower than 10% of the market as of today, so you cannot really neglect not at least doing smoke on these devices.
So if you are thinking, what is your recommendation if I'm building a cloud, or if I'm building a lab internally? Do I need to have iOS 9 and 10? Do I need to have one of them? What do you think?
So since these are two different operating systems, two different generations, and two totally different devices with different screen sizes and hardware, I would at least pick one device from iOS 9, one device from iOS 10. For legacy purposes, we still see, again, a significant amount of users that are not moving or upgrading from these devices. Perfecto, by the way, supports these devices in its cloud. So you can do some science and testing in our cloud as well if you don't want to acquire these devices for good, but these devices are still out there and being used. No doubt that the majority of the market today is on iOS 11 and 12. This is where I put the majority of phones and tablets. And by the way, the distribution between the iPhones and tablets on iOS 11 and 12 is quite big. This is why I recommend between 4 to 6 devices on iOS 11 and between 4 to 6 devices on iOS 12. This will give you the right distribution between the different minor and major versions of these two operating systems, including coverage on the different screen size and resolutions, and we'll soon see some bugs related to the screen size and resolution.
Important thing here that iPhone 6, iPhone 8, iPhone 7 can be upgraded to the new iOS.
Yeah.
But you have to remember, some of your customers will not upgrade. Yeah. So if you're going to upgrade all of your devices to the latest iOS version, you will not be able to downgrade.
Yes.
So in this case, it's not only important to have all of these devices, but also to make sure so at least one or two devices contains the oldest version, because the downgrade is something that's not very easy to implement in iPhone. So if I'm trying to summarize, we need at least four devices for iOS 11. I will do 6 for iOS 12,
yeah.
And then we need to make sure that some of them has the iOS 12 and other iOS 11.
Yeah.
Another important thing is I can see a lot of different screen size.
Yes.
And this is something that happened in the last year. More and more screen size in iOS. It actually affects both native application and web.
Responsive as well. Yeah, definitely. So that's this is matching my recommendation between 10 to 15 devices. An important thing to note here is that iPhone X was announced by Apple as discontinued. So whatever is in stock as of today will be sold by different vendors, but they won't continue to produce this device, which is quite popular. So again, if you have it in stock, keep it because it's definitely popular out there, but Apple is not continuing the production of this device. They're putting all the efforts on the new iPhone XS, XS Max, and the XR, which is coming next month.
So let's talk a little bit about the testing. What are the tests that you can run? And that's generic to both iOS 11, 12. I don't think the iOS 9 will be support XCUITest, but
no.
So you can run your test, or you can run your two different type of tests. We have the XCUITest and we have the Appium. So I just want to give highlights about what is this Appium and what is the XCUITest technology, and then we can drill down and talk a little bit about the differences. So XCUITest is a technology developed by Apple, added to the Xcode, and it allows you to create white box automation, which means that you are familiar with the code, you're familiar with the object, and you will be able to create a test. It's been executed directly from the Xcode or from your build environment. Some people call it by mistake unit test. It's not a unit test. It's on real devices. It's an end-to-end testing. It's a UI testing, and it's run on the real devices. But it runs very, very fast and actually works very nice. For the Appium is a different approach of testing. Appium is a Selenium-based remote WebDriver, which will support native application. It allows you to get the application objects DOM style. So you're getting tree of all the objects, and based on the object, you run some command on the device in order to connect it. Appium is an open source, and in order to make sure that Appium works with the iOS 12, I tried to execute it. It was very hard. There are some bugs. It's required to upgrade. The Appium, it's required to connect to the device. There have been some part of the applications that did not run. So the connectivity of the pure Appium with the newest version is not that stable. And this is why in Perfecto, the way that we connect, we have another layer that give us more option to have a better connectivity layer. And then we run the standard Appium on top of that.
Yeah.
Little bit differences between the Appium and the, who should use what. So as a developer, you should use XCUITest. It's very easy. It's in your Xcode environment, and it's really easy to execute it. As a tester, I suggest you use both, because XCUITest allows you to run fast tests. You can run the same test that the developer runs, and you can run it on real devices. But Appium allows you to execute external tests. It's going to run tests that works like your user. And in this case, it's also very important. And another thing that's very important in both of the solutions is to try to add some visual validation, because the screen size can affect the way that the objects looks on the screen. So just let's go over the table just to summarize. So the language in Appium, you can write any code that you want. It can be Java, JavaScript, Ruby, whatever you want. In XCUITest, we are talking only about Swift or Objective-C. Appium is an open source versus XCUITest, which is an Apple support. For Appium, Appium can support APK and IPA. XCUITest only IPA, and it's quite interesting. What happened in XCUITest, when you compile your application, you are getting two IPAs. One is the application IPA, the other one is the test IPA. So you install both of the application, the test and the test and the application. You run the test on this. In order to make sure that you have the XCUITest and write a test, you must have the code. The test type, white box versus black box, and this is why I think it's important to run both as part of your pipeline. XCUITest is much faster than Appium, but some tests must be executed externally by Appium. To set up Appium, it's really hard. You need to install a lot of things. You need to make sure that the application is the certificate is right. There is a lot of problem when we're talking about iOS certification problems. We in Perfecto try to make it easier for you, because we re-sign the application and install it on each device. But to set up Appium server or Appium lab, it's very hard. It's required also Mac machine. So it's not easy to set it up. For the CI setup, again, the CI setup for Appium is actually easier than XCUITest, because it's done after you set up the test and the environment. The connection to the Jenkins or to any CI test will be easier. For the XCUITest, it's much complicated, because you need to make sure that you have access to the code, you need to make sure that you have access to the IPAs, and you need to make sure that everything will be executed on Mac machines. The flakiness of the test, Appium will be more flakiness, because it's a black box, because you are not familiar with the object, because the object can be changed. XCUITest works directly with the code, so the flakiness of the test is very low. And one last thing I want to add is who is actually using it. As I said, Appium mostly QA, XCUITest mostly developers, iOS developer, not Android. But as I mentioned before, my recommendation is to have XCUITest at the beginning as after build, after commit, and during the nightly build, the regression should be run on Appium.
Excellent. Thanks, Uzi. One comment or clarification to add on top of that is, as mentioned, Appium is a cross-platform testing, so it runs on Android and iOS. But also, when we talk about white box versus black box, it's important to understand that XCUITest runs on the application itself. So if you want to test outside of the app, include system events, incoming calls, etc., work with multiple dependencies of applications, this is when Appium comes and complement your test suite. So this is why when Uzi said that you actually need both, this is where you want a full and complete test suite strategy. You need to actually use both, and it can be done by different personas. So we are reaching now I'd say the more technical part of the webinar where we're going to drill into some demos and show you iOS 12 with the new iPhones. We're going to touch some interactive testing in the Perfecto cloud, show you some parallel execution of a cool demo that Uzi prepared, show you some check deposit using Appium, image injection, and do some smart reporting, and also conclude, Uzi, with XCUITest.
Yes. Okay, so let's talk a little bit about what I did in my change, what I changed in my script in order to make it work. So what you can see here, this is part of my application. You can see the phone and the camera. This is actually part of the flow. I'm opening the camera, I'm taking a picture, the image injection replaced the pictures that have been taken off the cloud with a real check, and this is actually the flow in the application. I will show it to you in a second. But because these devices are very, very fast, so before the page is actually loaded, in my test, what I did, I waited for the back button to appear and then press on it. But because the application, the test is the devices are very, very fast, I got the tree immediately before the page actually loaded, and I pressed the back button before. So just a recommendation for a best practice, when you want to have to verify that the page loaded, wait for more than one element and wait to and verify that few elements appear on the screen. And that's the only way that you will be able to run one test that verify that all the flow actually works and all the UI flow actually all the UI element being shown on the device itself. So this is actually part of the report, and you can see at the beginning when I execute the back button, it's actually found it before the page being fully loaded. Another thing that important is the screen size and the resolution. So what you can see here, I have two examples. One example is the logout button. This logout button looks very good on a few devices, but looks like that on other devices. So the problem is that the screen size and the resolution actually affect your application. So when Eran mentions that you need a lot of devices, 6 devices for iOS 12, 6 devices for iOS 11, he meant that you need to have a different screen because, and this is very important, when you have different screens, that you will be able to see how does your UI looks on the different devices. And for that, I just want to add one more important thing. When we're talking about the logout button, for example, if I'm going with Appium, I would look for the element with the text logout. When I'm going to Appium, I'm getting the element property, and the element property will be logout. So this element will be found, and there will be no problem to press on this button, which means the test that need to the logout test will pass.
Yeah.
But if you are adding a visual validation, and it's something that we have in Perfecto Mobile, is the capability to look for the visual element, the visual string. And if you are going to look for logout in this screen, you are not going to find it because the OCR, that's the way that we are using it, will give you just the L out and not the full logout.
Same thing on the CVS application on the left, right? The beautiful harvest, you won't find the right text, so it will obviously fail when you're doing it via visual, of course.
Exactly, and you can see here that this bug, the sizing bug, is not just on my test application, but also on a real application, and we'll show it to you in a second. Last, it's also related to a test automation. These are two devices. This is the new iPhone and iPhone 6. And I have the login button here. You can see here that I have the login button. At the moment that I opened the keyboard, I couldn't press on the login button. And actually, I have to tell you, I'm not a good iPhone developer, but and when I developed my application, I actually forgot to implement the close keyboard when you press on the return button. And at the when I run my test on the emulator, when I run my XCUITest, everything works. At the first time that I upload it to a real device and try to run it, it works on the new device, on the iOS 12 on the iPhone Max, it actually works for me. But when I try it on all device, I couldn't press the login button. So this command, find element by label login click, actually ended with error when it couldn't be found. So the Appium, my Appium script actually ended with error when I executed on this device. So you have to remember, override object cannot be reproduced on simulator, and the keyboard behavior is something that you need to test. And when you run your test, you have to run it on a real devices. So I just give you the screenshot of what happened when I executed on simulator. On simulator, when I execute the text, the keyboard never been open. When I run it on Perfecto devices or on real device, the keyboard open and actually covered the login button.
I think that this advice would actually be relevant also for Android, not just iOS.
Yes.
For Appium, yeah.
So both Appium, you need to run it on real device. Both Appium and XCTest. When I execute the XCTest on the devices, you could see that it passed for me.
Yeah.
So I think it's about time to see the new devices, and it's about time to run the demo. So what do we have here? So this is Perfecto Mobile Cloud. When I'm going and open the devices, I can see that there are a few devices that were reserved for me. I have the iPhone Max, which is the new iPhone. I'm going to open iPhone Max, and let me open also iPhone XS. And I also want to open maybe all the iPhones, so you can see all of the devices actually supported. So let's open another iPhone, which is iPhone 8. Okay. So I have all of the devices opened, and I can play with the device. So for the manual testing, if I want to play with any of the devices, can be old device or new device, I have full access. So you can see I can get all the applications that have been installed on any device. So if I'm here on this device, I can see the list of the application and open any applications that I want. So if I want to open the GarageBand on this application, all I need to do is to press the play button. So what actually happened here? Perfecto give you full support on the devices. So I have the GarageBand open, and it's also support all the low-level connectivity options. Let's close the old iOS device because we are familiar with that. But let's see. I'm able to scroll and to open the device. I'm able to install any applications that I want. So I can just right now take any applications that I want and install it directly to the device. So all the advanced capability, the way to get the list of the devices, to get the screenshots from the devices, to get logs from the devices, everything is actually supported in the application, in the new iOS devices. So again, Perfecto iOS devices, iOS XS Max and iOS X available on Perfecto Cloud on the same days that it's been released. A small thing, it was really nice to see 137 devices that arrived to our data center on the first day. So remember that the CVS bug. Let's try to reproduce it. So what we are seeing here is that we have the phone. We are looking for a specific candle, I think. Yeah, it's called a candle. My question is, why did you look for a candle in CVS? But I don't want to get any answer for that. Let's keep it like this. Okay, holiday season. It's actually a good answer. And when I open on the device and try to add to the basket the following device, you can see that it actually does not appear, it's fully appear.
So if I wanted to automate that scenario via object IDs and choose the beautiful harvest or something, it would have worked, but if I want to test for a visual element, it cannot find the string in that regard.
And as you can see, they didn't, and that's something I wanted to show you, they didn't implement the rotation
landscape and portrait,
in the application. So let's reset the device. and now we have a device with a bug. So that's for the manual action. So just to summarize, manual action, we have the devices. You can do anything on the device. You can install application, get the logs, play manually with the devices. You will be able to record session, get a screenshot, run cleanup of the device, install your application on the device, etc., etc. One thing I just want to show you before I'll run my automation is let me explain a little bit about the automations that we have. So this is the automations that I created on the both iOS, that works on any iOS. And what I want to do, I would like to log into the application. So let me add a user and let me add my password. And as I mentioned before, you can see that I can see the login button, but before on other devices it doesn't support, so I had to implement the press on the return button in order to see the other options. And then I'm logged in, and I would like to explain what I would like to do and what is the test case. So what you can see here, I'm getting the balance, and this is a random number. This is my account number, and then I would like to do the check deposit. The check deposit is actually going to open the camera, and then I would like to take a screenshot. If I would execute, by the way, this is Perfecto Mobile Data Center. This is what actually happened. This device is actually located in the cage in the cabinet. So let's talk a little bit about the check deposit scenario. The idea or the requirement is to take, if I would run it manually, I would open the camera, replace this view of the data center with an image, and then replace it. If I do it manually, replace it with a check, and what we would see here is a check. But you have to remember, we have a devices in the lab. We cannot replace images or put checks in the cloud. So what we added in Perfecto Mobile is the capability to inject image, capability to open the camera, take a screenshot, and then replace the image that's returned from the camera with predefined image. And this is what the test going to do. And I would like to go to Appium in order to show you the automation. So let me just return to my code. So this is the test itself, and I would like to show you a little bit what do I have in my chest. So this is my test. I have I'm opening the application. I'm getting a web driver. I'm opening the application. I'm looking for the user, enter the user. I'm looking for the password, enter the password. And then if the pop-up, sometimes I have a pop-up that asks for and then I close the keyboard. If the keyboard is open, I close the keyboard. That's actually what we have here. And then I'm logging into the application, and here I do something. I'm starting image injection command. This is a command, proprietary command to Perfecto Mobile. You can see it's actually part of my standard Appium. All I need to do is to provide the driver, the remote web driver, to the command itself. If you want to see how we implement that, you can see that we are running standard execute script, standard Appium execute script with the command that's proprietary to Perfecto Mobile. So your standard script will continue to work. You don't need to install anything on your side. Everything will keep working. And then I'm continuing with the check deposit scenario, and at the end, I'm actually stop the image injection. So before I'll execute my Appium script, I just want to show you what is the private check demo JPEG. So in advance, in the Perfecto Mobile repository, I upload my media. It's private or public, I don't remember. So it's the private check deposit. So you can see I upload this image, and this is an image of a check. So after I'm going to take the screenshot. After I'm going to take the image or the photo from the camera, I will replace it with this image. Why? Because the application expected to get a check. So this is the test that I'm about to run, and let's run the test right now. So in order to execute the test on all of the devices, I would like to go here to my come on. Where's my code? So this is the code. I would like to execute it on few devices. The way that I'm execute the same script on few devices, I just said I would like to execute it on iPhone 8. I would like to execute it on the iPhone X, and I'm providing the UUID of the iPhone X. I would like to execute it on the Mac and on iOS 11. And the only thing that I need to do right now is just to hit the run button. Let's go to Perfecto Cloud and see what happens on the cloud while the test is running. So 3 devices that I actually asked for been opened, and I'm about to install the application. So the new application being installed right now. As a best practice, and that's something I really like, I open and close the application. So at the beginning of the test, you will see that the application, now it's installed, opened, and I'm about to close the application, and then we'll start to perform the automation. So right now I have one script that's been executed on 3 devices, and you can see that all the tests runs on all of the devices. So I just logged in, and I'm going to the check deposit, open the camera. You can see on the iOS 8 now it's run faster. Sometimes it's been changed based on the devices. And then the camera take. So you can see that I took a camera from the lab itself, but when I return, it actually showed us the check itself. So this is actually what I wanted to do. So as the application, or if you are thinking about the application, the element that the application gets is actually the check itself. So although I'm sitting remote to the devices, although I don't have access to the devices, I will be able to control the data from the camera, and I can create an advanced automation. So if I'll try to summarize what we saw, that we have one script that's been executed on 3 devices. It's been a very simple script that controls all the different elements, but also allows me to use advanced options like replace the image with a check in order to run check deposit test case. This test case is very unique to Perfecto Mobile. We have a lot of customers that actually work with that, and it allows us to reach highest percentage of automation projects. So for a lot of our customers, when we start to work with, they started with 50, 60% automation. With the advanced option, we can increase it to almost 90, 95% automation.
Also, there was a few questions coming up as you were demonstrating. One of the questions was if you can show in the Appium code the desired capabilities that you placed. Can you show that?
Okay. Yeah. So what I did here, I actually used, these are the desired capabilities. I have the device name. This is the device, the platform, and the bundle ID, the name of the application. I also added the location that those devices in Boston. Perfecto Cloud has a different location, and I can run the same test not only on a different devices and a different carrier, but also in a different location. So this is what you can see. These are the desired capabilities that I provide. There is another one important capability that I have, and this is actually in the configuration file, is the security token. Security token is the way that you log into the Perfecto Cloud. So you need to have the security token, and then the server itself is the cloud of the server. So in order to connect to Perfecto Mobile, all you need to do is to replace the server with the cloud, add the security token, and add the 3 capability of the mobile device. By the way, you can also have any capability on web if we are talking about a responsive web. The last thing that I want to show before the results is is the report. So you can see here that I execute a script. That's the script that's been executed on 3 devices. And I have a way to compare between the images. So this is exactly what I just show you before. In order to verify, wait for all of the elements to be reload before you are taking the screenshot. So this is actually what I have here. I can compare between the different devices and how does it look. And if I drill down to a specific execution, I can see that I have all the test steps, I have image everywhere, and I have full video of the execution. So everything that happened during the execution is something that I will be able to verify after that. So the support of the new iPhone devices are fully in Perfecto Mobile. It's not just the option to press on any button, but it gives you full support, the capability to run automation on the device, the capability to get the video, the audio, and to run advanced automation like check deposit. So before we'll continue, I think there are a few questions that have been asked from the audience. So let's talk a little bit about, we have a few more minutes for questions.
So yeah, we're still getting debates, of using XCUITest versus Appium. Again, I think after showing some of the demos here, check deposit, working outside of the app and inside the app. So there are different objectives. It's not just about the skill set, it's also about the test coverage.
That's a good point. For example, when I tried to test my open camera feature on emulator, it didn't work because there is no camera on the mobile device, so nothing been open, and I pressed on the key and I thought it's my problem, and the first time that I've been able to actually debug and check it is by connecting to a real device. So XCUITest on emulator is good, it's not good enough, real devices will be better, but as I mentioned before, a good pipeline contains both XCUITest and and Appium.
Another question was about how to retrieve logs from an iOS test execution. I think you've shown getting the log.
Yeah, so there are a few ways to do that. First of all, for the manual action, that's something I already showed you, is every time that I have the application, let me do it manually, so open the same device. We added this small feature here that said get logs. So that's one option. Another option is that as part of the automation, we have a command that said get logs. So the report itself contains the log. By the way, in case of error or crash, automatically the crash log will be added to the report. So let's try to open the Perfecto. I just want to show you how to get the log. I'll open the bank application and let's play with it a little bit. I think I have something here that let's have an invalid user and password again. And if I go to the log right now, I will be able to get the full logs from the application. So this is the standard std out with all the elements, and by the way, you can see that this is actually my my print that I have in the code. So as you can see, we have a full log support from the application, which can be added automatically to the report as part of the execution.
Excellent. We have one more question, which is a bit specific to an application that one of our guys from the audience sent us. His application has a scrollable table, and his application crashes when he's trying to get attributes from the table itself. Have we run into this kind of issues with Appium, working with tables within an app?
I don't remember this kind of happen, but if the application been crashed, it looks like a memory issue. Maybe you have all the data, the table data in the memory, and when you start to scroll, it's crashed. If it's an Appium crash, it doesn't happen in Perfecto Mobile. We have our different way to scroll. So as I told you before, we have an advanced option. It works with the same command, but you can see here, I think I have a scroll here. So here I implemented a scroll that said, okay, mobile touch swipe. It's totally different from the Windows scroll. So you can see here that I have implementation of better scrolling mechanism on Perfecto Mobile based on the Appium driver.
Very good. Okay, so I think with that, Uzi, I would like to conclude today's webinar, and thank you for the work on that, and thank all the audience for attending. And if you haven't started exploring iOS 12, iOS 12.1 beta on the new iPhones and the ones that are coming in the upcoming weeks, obviously it's highly recommended that you start doing so. Refresh your test lab, make sure that your scripts work on both new and older devices and operating systems, and good luck with the transition. And we'll see you in the next webinar. Thanks, Uzi.
Thank you, Eran. Thank you very much.